The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters in Real Estate Marketing, Arter SEO.
Hi, it's Alex Gubay with another episode of the Icons of Real Estate podcast. As someone who loves snowboarding, loves the state of Colorado, and loves Aspen in particular, I am fired up to be joined by Stephen Shane. Stephen, how are you today?
I'm well, Alex, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Excellent. And so before we get into all the great things of your local market there, let's talk about real estate in general, not just where you see it going right now, but your start. How did you break into real estate?
You know, it's interesting that you just mentioned snowboarding, because that's going to be part of this little, you may find.
Got my full attention.
Even more interesting. So I used to be in a family business. I'm originally from New York, and the family business was retail boating supply stores. So my father and my uncle were partners. They started off in a small hardware store on Long Island, lived upstairs, but it was near the water. So it kind of morphed into a boating supply store. I went to college. I lived in Manhattan, and my father's a very good salesperson, and he persuaded me to join this family business. And it was a rough business. My father and uncle were partners. My uncle doesn't have any children. My father wanted me to grow the business and to have this moving forward. And after X amount of years of me locking myself in the bathroom and crying because these two did not get along, I gave each of them a respectful ultimatum. They wouldn't go in the same room with one another. And I said, look, either we sell the business, I'll buy you out, I'll pay you not to come in, or you can run it, I'm done. So in 1994 on Halloween, we sold the business. And then—
you remember what you went as for Halloween? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't remember, but I'd like to think maybe Superman.
Yeah, I get it. This is a good time.
So then we sold the business. I ran the New York Marathon, and I used to vacation in Aspen as a single guy. And I ended up renting a place, sight unseen, kind of giving myself the ski season to figure out what I was going to do next, because believe me, this was not a huge business we sold, and I didn't get a big payday, like nothing. So I come to Aspen, and I end up seeing, so I see what the prices of real estate are, and I said, well, this doesn't take too much savvy. I'm going to go get my real estate license. I can figure 2.5%, 3% on these numbers. That's significant income. So I go get my license. At the same time, there was a young fellow here who approached me. This was at the advent of snowboarding, 1994, just when it was making inroads. And he had a friend who was leasing space at Keystone. So I'm in Aspen. This is in Keystone. Do you want to open a snowboard store? I said, look, I will take a look at a business plan, and I'm not moving to Keystone, but if it makes sense, this is something I would consider. And the next thing you know, here I am with my real estate license. And at the same time, within about 18 months, 2 years, I've got 6 snowboard stores in Colorado. And that was a marginal business. And my wife, my now wife, said to me at the time, hey, Stephen, you make more money doing one real estate deal than you do paying yourself a salary traveling around Colorado selling snowboards. Why don't you just focus on real estate and have snowboarding be your hobby? And that's what ended up happening. So I enjoyed real estate. I continued to lean in, and everybody needs that seminal moment, that one opportunity that presents itself. And then as you look in retrospect, it kind of either made or changed your career. So in Aspen Skiing Company is owned by the Crown family out of Chicago. Just a beautiful, nice, elegant family. The matriarch and the patriarch are probably today 96 and 92, and they have 7 children. My wife.
That's a really a beautiful life. Kind of the
Yeah,
norm.
yeah. So my wife taught tennis, and she must have taught tennis to either one of the 7 kids or their children. And we ended up having dinner with Susan Crown. And after dinner, we dropped her off at her house, and I knew she was building a home. And I said, "What are you doing with this home? I know you're building a home." She said, "Well, I'm going to sell it." So this is interesting. This is where you need to build courage. This is where you're willing to let lines blur between personal relationships and friendships and business. That doesn't always happen, but in real estate, that has to happen. That's your network. So my voice went up about 7 octaves, and I said, "Can I sell it for you?" She said, "Do you think you can?" I said, "I know I can."
Yeah, much more confidently.
Yeah, well, we're in the perception business. I'm not sure how confident I was at that point in time. And that may have been kind of the springboard to my career, selling a high net worth person's home, which validates you in the eyes of others. So that really is how I got into the business and then eventually succeeded in the business.
Man, what a remarkable story. You went from New York to Colorado to Chicago, and you even talked about the courage it takes to blur those lines and go for the sale. And especially being a sales professional, you're in a sales business. Obviously, you've sold a lot, so glad to have you here. We want to talk about that sales piece. That's a really good nugget, the courage. I like how you frame that. Takes guts. How much time would you say were you in the business before that happened, before that break?
So I was kind of running parallel paths. I was managing this snowboard business downstairs in my wife's employee housing townhome. I was in the basement operating the snowboard business, and then in turn, the real estate business. And then ultimately, when I started to do more and more real estate deals, I kind of segued out of the snowboard business and into real estate. If there are brokers listening to your podcast and they're successful brokers, they're not successful by accident. This is a full-time job. You need to commit. I mean, I take calls yesterday, 5:00 Sunday, somebody calling me, previous client, asking me a question, not even about something that would end up being another real estate deal, but just because I already sold her home, referred her to a Compass broker in another network, and she bought something there. That doesn't mean you stop advising. Very important, very important. Maintain those relationships. So it is a 7-day-a-week job.
I would really want to say this as well. As someone who's a business thinker, not just in sales, but in general, you're really describing selling the right way, identifying long-term relationships. And in real estate, my experience has been there's really no other industry with a higher net promoter score. related to success, right? If people refer you, I think you'll win over time. And let's talk about that. Once you hit that springboard and you did start seeing those referrals, what did you do to make the most of it? What did you do strategy wise to grow your business?
That's a great question. And it's an interesting industry and an interesting dynamic. So I like to refer to myself as elegantly aggressive. There's a certain amount of
This is New York in you.
well, there's a certain amount of self-promotion.
Yeah.
Now everybody else is promoting themselves, whether or not their promotion is warranted. So you have to take what you've accomplished and use that to generate new business and additional business. So how do you go about that? So there's the standard operating procedure in real estate where you might run an ad, recently sold. You might send a postcard out in the days of direct mail before we were so digital. And that postcard would go out to people in that neighborhood, most recent sale, right? So you are self-promoting, but the other component is organic. It's kind of one-on-one with people. And when you have an opportunity, when you walk into a room, when I walk into a room and I don't want to be Tatum's dad or Remy's dad, as much as I love my two daughters. I want to be Stephen Shane. He's that top producing Compass real estate broker. That's the identity that I need. And then when you talk to people, you have to understand who you're talking to and where they are coming from. Is this a potential buyer? Is this a potential seller? Is this somebody who's a high net worth person with great contacts? And then in turn, everything that you talk about is somewhat measured, admittedly. And you want to be strategic in what you say and hope that that will generate additional business. So elegantly aggressive.
I really like that framework. And I want to touch on one piece. Man, you just dropped so many good nuggets there. And so when you said the high net worth individual with context, do you find that those people purchasing $2 million, $5 million estates have more variables than the typical buyer? Or is that just a misnomer that might be a limiting belief for newer agents?
Well, first of all, and this is kind of crazy, $2 to $5 million in Aspen, kind of entry level.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Virginia and Arizona. Sorry.
So, and I don't mean anything. Yeah. It just is what it is. Every buyer, every seller deserves a broker's full attention. Keep in mind that $2 to $3 million buyer stepping up and buying a condo in town, that purchase price may make up a higher percentage of their net worth than a billionaire who's buying a $20 million home.
Yeah.
You need to be conscious of that. So everybody's different. It's funny. When I've been interviewed before and I was asked, where are your buyers from? And the interviewer is expecting me to say, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Houston, Dallas. My answer used to be, my buyers are coming from hedge funds and private equity.
Yeah.
So I would say that it used to be finance. Now, there are so many young, highly successful technology people out there that I'm not so sure that technology may not have leapfrogged finance. But those are I mean, if there were three categories of how people generate, where their income is generated, that are buying second or third homes here, it would be finance, technology, and then probably commercial real estate, shopping center developers, things like that. And then there's everybody else. We have our fair share of celebrities. It's people want to be here, and I don't blame them.
I can't blame them either.
uh,
For sure, for sure. And so as we wrap up, our conversation, we're going to touch on one or two more items, but one piece that has really stood out to me is when you were married, but you weren't as successful. It sounds like you found the right person, got your family around you. What are some things from a life perspective that are beyond tactics, but overarching, like get this right, it can really help you to success? That's one thing I see, people who are married and have foundations usually do pretty well. But what's one thing if you had to throw it out there? That's a tough one. I didn't prepare it for.
So that's a really good question. It really is. There's plenty of people who are smarter than I am, and have a higher education than I do. What I tell my brokers and my team and my support, and I remind everybody of this every day, is business is nothing more than people. We are all people. And to succeed in real estate, you really have to understand where your buyer or seller is coming from. It changes all of the time. So there are certain sellers, especially in a market like the one that we lived through during COVID, those sellers may have been somewhat aspirational and say, hey, if you can get me this, I'm willing to sell, right? Because we had limited inventory and great demand. That then, at the same time, there are sellers who are legitimate sellers. They are ready to move out of Aspen, or maybe they want to downsize, or maybe they've outgrown their place and they want to sell and get a bigger place. So real sellers, you've got to listen to the sellers, understand where they're coming from, and then tailor what you're doing for them appropriately. Naturally, that translates to buyers as well. Now, I can be speaking to a buyer and the buyer will say, Stephen, I don't want to go over $5 million. If they're not familiar with Aspen and I send them options below 5 million or 5.5, up to 5.5 million or 6 million, because there's some negotiation that's going to take place, and then they see what they receive in Aspen for that amount of money, then you've got to pivot. You've got to hear, and you've got to then talk them through it. So the single greatest skill set I think I have is listening. You've got to be a good listener. You also need to remember that you're the professional. All of the buyers that I work with, all of the sellers that I work with, not all, but the great majority of them have reached a pinnacle of success, a greater success than me, okay? And they are the experts in their industry, but I'm the expert in this industry. So I need to have a voice. I can't just acquiesce to what they say, okay? They're counting on me. And brokers need to remember that we're the professional and we need to give sound advice to our clients.
Wow. You're brokering properties and information. You get the premium for that information. And really, the listening, I can see that, especially in our conversation. And I would say also relationships. Everything you've spoken about sounds like long-term building. As we talk about building for the next year or two, what are some goals in the 6, 12, 24-month calendar, if any, for Steve and Shane's team?
So
Hold you accountable.
I think I'm different than most. So if you speak to a lot of people in our industry, they set goals.
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay.
My goal is to be the best I can be. And then I let that fall into place. If I put my best foot forward, occasion after occasion, opportunity after opportunity, and I do no business, nothing, okay, then I'm okay with that. Other than I'm going to starve, but I'm okay with that. So there are people who say, oh, I did whatever the number is, $100 million in sales last year. And this year I want to see growth of 25%. So I'm looking, for $125 million in sales. I just want to know that I'm doing the best possible job I can. And then I let the chips fall as they may. I collaborate with my team. It's Monday morning. When we arrive, my team will have action items listed. There'll be 30 action items. I write that either Sunday or at 4:30 in the morning this morning. And then it goes to everyone and we discuss. You want to make sure that you have smart people surrounding you, hardworking people surrounding you, because I don't have all of the answers. There are people who are younger who interact with younger people. And if they're making moves into Aspen, their insight is invaluable. Another team member can have strong technology skills, much stronger than mine, by the way, not a high bar. So you turn to them for additional information. The point of the matter is, if I did last year 335 million, which I think is what I did, in sales, it's an arbitrary number to say next year I want to do 375 million or 400 million. Well, of course I do. I want to do $500 million. It doesn't make a difference, okay? That number's not going to change how we perform. It's not going to modify our business model. That business model is going to be the best, most creative effort we can put forward, and the numbers hopefully will follow.
Stephen, I am really in line with that answer, because for someone to say that, from you, I feel like it's genuine. Some people, have different strategies. I really hear from you that you put it all in every day and don't have any focus on anything else apart from being great. And that is great. I tell you what, there's so many different ways of winning out here. I'm so happy that you found yours and are able to explain that to our audience. And so as we wrap up, I just want to celebrate you one more time and say, welcome to being the newest icon in real estate. And is there any other piece of information or closing tidbit that you feel like you'd want to share as we do wrap up?
The only other thing that I would say that we really haven't touched upon is that you need to be willing to get uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
So you or I do a routine, right? I'm very routine oriented in my life and in my business. Okay, I get up very early, check my emails. If I have to do an analysis for a client, I send off the analysis. I'm having coffee, then I exercise, and then I come into the office. So that is a routine. We find comfort in a routine. But where or how or why do I say get uncomfortable? So I have there's a young broker in New York, and he makes me laugh. He goes out to dinner, and believe me, it's not based on the menu. He goes to a restaurant where he is either going to run into existing clients or potential new clients. He may not like the food in that restaurant. It's secondary to him. That's what he does. So we're always working. So when I asked Susan if she would sell her home, or if I could sell her home, that was me getting uncomfortable. There are people that I reach out to that even at this point in time in my career where I don't need to reach out to them, I do. And it could be an uncomfortable conversation. It may not be somebody who I just want to try to get their business. But if you're going to be in this business, you've got to be willing to get uncomfortable. And that's the only other, as you would say, nugget I would share.
My goodness, I started to feel felt that. I hear that. Man, that's a really good piece. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. There are so many different ways, and I'm glad that you really have yours and you're willing to share that. So as we sign off, my name is Alex Dubay, and this has been another episode of the Icons of Real Estate podcast. Till next time.
Thank you, Alex.